Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're going somewhere that, frankly, usually belongs in the pages of an Indiana Jones script.
Or maybe a Dan Brown novel.
Exactly. We aren't looking at a dusty manuscript or a broken piece of pottery. We are heading to a specific temple in Galle, Sri Lanka, the Polkadawila Viharaya.
And we're not even really looking at the temple itself, we're looking up.
At the ceiling. Specifically at a wall painting. One that I imagine most people would just walk right past.
For sure. To the untrained eye, it's just beautiful, traditional Buddhist art. You know the style. Very serene, colorful.
Lots of lotus flowers, that sort of thing. But as we dug into this massive stack of research you've brought, it turns out this painting is effectively a Trojan horse.
That is the perfect way to describe it. It's a time capsule. It's a technical schematic hiding in plain sight.
And what is it a schematic of?
It's what's known as a Rashi chakra. In plain English, that's an astrological birth chart.
Okay, a birth chart. That's interesting, but...
But here's the hook. And this is the mystery that defines this entire deep dive. This chart is traditionally said to belong to the Buddha.
Right.
But if you actually run the math, the forensic astronomy, so to speak, the planetary positions painted on that wall do not match the date we read in every history textbook in the world.
We're talking about the famous 563 BCE or maybe 623 BCE dates, right? The ones that are on Wikipedia in the encyclopedias taught in every university.
Precisely. They do not fit. It's like looking at a painting of a night sky with a full moon and trying to claim it was painted during a solar eclipse. The astronomy simply contradicts the accepted history.
So it's not just a little off, like a few degrees.
No. The stars are in the wrong places. Completely. Yeah. Okay, so today we're doing something a little different. We aren't just reciting history, we're going to test it. We're going to treat this wall painting like crime scene evidence.
We're going to use forensic astronomy to reverse engineer the actual birth date of the historical Buddha based on the data hidden in this art. And the date that comes out of the map, it's not in the 6th century BCE.
No, it is not. It points to something much, much older, a date that supports what is called the Hela perspective.
The Hela perspective. Can you break that down for us?
It's the theory that the Buddha was part of a civilization in Sri Lanka, or Hela deep in antiquity. We're talking about a timeline that includes some pretty radical claims.
Like what?
A 120-year lifespan, a 13-year reign as a warrior king, and a birth date in 953 BCE.
953 BCE. That's hundreds and hundreds of years earlier than the accepted timeline. That pushes the whole story back into a completely different era of human history.
It changes everything.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have a lot of sources here. Visual decoding of the temple painting, some very complex Vedic astrological calculations, Rashi, Navamsaka, divisional charts.
And a dialogue, a sort of back and forth between a researcher and an analytical intelligence, basically verifying all the math. It's pretty dense stuff.
It looks like we're getting into the weeds of what I'm calling God mode astrology here.
We are, but it's necessary weeds. Because to understand the person, you have to understand the blueprint. And I think the best place to start is with the chart itself.
The painting.
Exactly. When you look at the painting in the Polkadawila Viharaya and you translate those symbols back into planetary positions, you realize this isn't just a good horoscope. It is what we call a God mode configuration.
I love that term, God mode. It sounds like a cheat code in a video game where you have infinite health and ammo. What makes this chart so special, technically?
It's what's called a grand cross of exaltation. In Vedic astrology, planets aren't just placed randomly. They have specific signs where they're at their absolute peak power. This is called their exaltation or ucha state.
Okay, so exaltation means peak performance.
Think of it like the signal strength on your phone. Most people are walking around with planets operating at 2 or 3 bars. Maybe, if you're lucky, you have one planet at 5 bars, full signal.
Okay, so one exalted planet is lucky. 2 is really rare.
Exactly. Great kings, world leaders, geniuses, they might have 2, maybe 3 if they're generational figures.
So this chart has?
This chart has 5. 5 key planets in positions of massive exalted strength.
5. That sounds statistically impossible. Walk me through them. What are we looking at?
All right, let's start with the central power source, the sun. In this chart, the sun is in Aries. Now, Aries is the sign where the sun is exalted.
The king is on his throne.
The king is on his throne, radiating maximum power. It represents the self, the soul's authority. But it's not just in Aries. It is placed in the 10th house.
Yeah, for those of us who aren't astrologers, what does the 10th house represent?
The 10th house is the house of career, public standing, and authority. It's the highest point in the sky, directly overhead. For the sun to be in the 10th house, the birth has to take place at high noon.
High noon. So the sun is blazing directly overhead, no shadows.
No shadows, correct. So you have the king archetype operating at maximum solar power at the highest visibility. It's what is called an Abhijit Muhurta, a victorious moment.
So this isn't a chart for someone who hides in the shadows. This is a chart for someone who commands the light.
That's a great way to put it. This is a public figure of immense authority.
Okay, so that's a superpowered sun. That's one. What's next?
Then you look at the first house, the ascendant. This represents the self, the body, the immediate personality. In this chart, the rising sign is Cancer. And sitting right there in the first house is Jupiter.
And let me guess, Jupiter likes being in Cancer.
Jupiter loves being in Cancer. It is exalted there. When you have exalted Jupiter in the first house, specifically in a cardinal sign like Cancer, it creates a very specific planetary combination called Hamsa Yoga.
Hamsa Yoga, what does that mean?
Hamsa means swan. In mythology, the swan can separate milk from water, so it represents the ability to discern pure truth from lies.
So it's the ultimate wisdom filter, a built-in BS detector.
Exactly. It indicates divine protection, immense wisdom, and the nature of a world teacher. It is the classic signature of a guru.
So just with these two planets, you have the ultimate king from the sun and the ultimate guru from Jupiter, both maxed out.
Both at full power. And they're in a square aspect, which creates a dynamic tension between that kingly authority and that guru-like wisdom.
That's a powerful combination. But usually when we think of the Buddha, we think of peace. Yet, looking at your notes here, I see Mars is heavily involved, and Mars is the planet of war.
That is where this gets fascinating, and it's where the story starts to change. Look at the 7th house, the house of relationships, the public, and also opposition.
Okay.
We have Mars there, situated in the sign of Capricorn, and yes, Mars is exalted in Capricorn.
So we have a war planet at max power.
This creates another one of these powerful yogas, this one called Ruchaka Yoga. Usually in a mundane chart, this makes a conquering general. It is pure, executive warrior energy. It gives the person a relentless drive and the capacity to command.
Wait, I have to stop you there. I thought the Buddha was the ultimate pacifist. Non-violence, ahimsa. Why on earth does he have a conquering general placement in his chart?
And that is the nuance we often miss when we look at history through a modern, somewhat sanitized lens. Ruchaka Yoga gives the capacity to conquer. It gives the iron will.
Right.
In a spiritual context, think about what the Buddha actually did. He sat under a tree and faced down Mara, the personification of desire, fear, and death. He refused to move until he broke through the simulation. You cannot do that if you are passive.
No, that's an act of will.
It's an act of supreme will. You can only do that if you have the unshakable discipline of a warrior.
So it's weaponized peace. It's spiritual warfare. The battle is internal.
Precisely. It's the conquering of the self rather than the conquering of land. But, as we will see later when we get to the biography, it also suggests a phase of life where he might have been a literal commander.
Oh, that's a teaser. Okay, so that's Sun, Jupiter, Mars, all exalted. Who else invited themselves to this party?
Venus. Venus is in the 9th house, the house of Dharma, religion, and higher truth. And guess what? Venus is exalted in Pisces.
Of course it is. This is getting ridiculous.
It's an absolutely stacked chart. This placement indicates supreme devotion, artistic genius, and a universal kind of love. It softens that hard, general energy of Mars. It adds the layer of compassionate spirituality.
So that's why his teachings weren't just a dry list of rules.
They were poetic. They were beautiful. It gives the velvet to the iron.
Iron velvet. I like that. Okay, and the 5th one. You mentioned this one is the key to the whole mystery.
Saturn. This is the clincher. Saturn is in the 8th house, in the sign of Aquarius. Now, Aquarius is Saturn's own sign. It's Mula Trikona. It's comfortable there. It's powerful there.
And the 8th house is?
The 8th house is the house of longevity, death, transformation, and occult knowledge.
Saturn in the house of death. That sounds ominous.
It sounds bad, but in astrology, it's actually the secret to immortality, so to speak. When the Lord of Time and Death, Saturn, is strong in the house of death, he doesn't kill you, he protects you.
Oh, okay.
It creates Ayushkaraka, the indicator of immense lifespan. This is the structural beam that holds the whole chart together and allows this person to live a very, very long life.
So statistically, what are the odds of this? I mean, planets move at different speeds. Jupiter's fast, Saturn's slow. What are the chances of all of these planets being in these specific signs at the exact same moment?
Astronomically. It is incredibly rare. We are talking about a configuration that might happen once in thousands of years. Just finding a time where Jupiter is in Cancer and Saturn is in Aquarius simultaneously is the cryptographic key.
Why that combination specifically?
Because they have such different orbital periods, Jupiter takes about 12 years to go around the sun, Saturn takes about 30. Getting them to lock into those specific signs at the same time is difficult.
Right.
Getting them to do it while the sun is in Aries and Mars is in Capricorn, it's a black swan event, an astronomical alignment of immense power and rarity.
And this brings us to what you call the physics of the chart. You mentioned that the sun is in Aries.
And the moon is in Libra, correct. If the sun is in the first sign of the zodiac, Aries, and the moon is in the seventh sign from it, Libra, they are exactly 180 degrees apart in the sky.
And when the sun and moon are opposite?
It's a full moon, a Purnima. This aligns perfectly with the tradition of Vesak Purnima, that the Buddha was born, enlightened, and died on a full moon in May.
So the internal physics of the painting are consistent. Sun in the 10th house means it's noon. Sun opposite the moon means it's a full moon. The chart holds water. It's a valid snapshot of the sky.
It is a valid snapshot. The question is, from what year?
Exactly. So the painting is a valid snapshot. But here is the problem. If you take the year 563 BCE, the date printed in every textbook, and you look at the sky, surely the stars must be somewhat close.
They aren't even close. They don't match at all.
Really? Not even a little?
Not even a little bit. In 563 BCE, Jupiter was likely in Virgo or Libra. Saturn was likely in Cancer. They were in what's called a 68 relationship, known as Shastashtaka.
What does that mean?
It's a position of conflict, of friction, of disease. It completely contradicts the God mode harmony, the grand cross of exaltation that we see in the temple painting. It's the opposite energy.
So if 563 BCE is out and 623 BCE is out, why do we use them? Where did those dates even come from?
That is a massive historical debate involving something called the corrected long chronology versus the short chronology, which we could do a whole other deep dive on.
Give us the short version.
The short answer is, Western historians in the 19th century made a best guess based on limited texts and king lists that might have been edited or misinterpreted. But if we trust the painting, if we trust this time capsule left by the Hela astronomers who might have had better or older records, we have to find a date that actually fits the stars.
And that search takes us back.
Way back.
To 953 BCE.
To 953 BCE. When we scan the astronomical ephemeris, essentially the timetable of the solar system, for a 3,000-year window, there are very few candidates that fit that Jupiter in Cancer plus Saturn in Aquarius lock.
There are others, though.
There are a few. There's a candidate around 607 BCE, another around 547 BCE, but they have flaws. The degrees are off, the sun isn't quite exalted, other things don't line up. But the perfect frequency match, the one where the degrees align, where the sun is exalted, where the moon is full in Libra, is May 12, 953 BCE.
May 12, 953 BCE. That is incredibly specific. And the location matters too, right? You mentioned zero shadow earlier.
No. Yes. This is why the Hela, or Sri Lankan birth theory, is so compelling here. The scriptures describe the birth as a miraculous event where all shadows vanish.
Right, which sounds like poetry.
You can take it as poetic metaphor, or you can take it as astronomical data.
And we are taking it as data today.
If it's data, it implies a zero shadow day. This is a real astronomical phenomenon. It happens when the sun is directly overhead at a 90-degree angle. In Kandy, Sri Lanka, which is near the equator, this happens twice a year. One of those times is in May.
So at noon in May, in Kandy, you have zero shadow.
You have zero shadow. The conditions are met.
But what about the traditional birthplace, Lumbini in Nepal?
Lumbini is at roughly 27 degrees north latitude. Because of the tilt of the Earth, the sun never goes directly overhead there. Even at noon in the middle of summer, there is always a shadow. The zero shadow phenomenon is physically impossible in Nepal.
Wow.
It is only possible in the tropical latitudes between the Tropic of Cancer and the Tropic of Capricorn, like Sri Lanka.
That is wild. So the painting is essentially a GPS coordinate and a timestamp combined. It says time, May 953 BCE, location, tropics.
Precisely. And it gives us more than just a date. It gives us the nakshatra, or birth star. Based on the moon's position in Libra in this chart, the birth star is Vishaka, specifically the second pada, or second quarter.
Vishaka. Does that name have a meaning?
It does. Vishaka is known as the star of purpose. Its symbol is a triumphal archway. It represents a split path, the choice between worldly power and spiritual power, and the ultimate success after a struggle. It's about fiery determination.
That fits the profile of the Buddha perfectly, the choice between being a king and being a sage.
It's literally the core theme of his life, encoded in his birth star.
So we have a new date, 953 BCE. This places the Buddha in deep antiquity, way before the Mauryan Empire, aligning him with what the sources call the Mahasamada lineage of kings. This is rewriting history.
It is, and if we accept this date, we have to rewrite his biography too, because the chart tells a story that is very different from the Prince locked in a palace narrative we usually hear. The Hela timeline paints a much more robust, and I think, a much more realistic picture.
Let's get into that. The first big shocker for me in this research was the lifespan. Mainstream history says he died or attained parinirvana at 80 years old. You're saying 120.
The astrology practically screams 120. We already mentioned Saturn in the 8th house in the main chart, the D1, which gives a predisposition to longevity.
Right, the Lord of Death, protecting the house of death.
Exactly. But in Vedic astrology, we verify everything with the D9 chart, the Navamsaka. The D1 chart is like the tree, what everyone sees. The D9 is the fruit of that tree. It's the inner reality, the soul's potential.
The X-ray, kind of. And what does the X-ray show?
In the D9 chart for this date, Saturn, the planet of longevity, becomes exalted in Libra.
So Saturn is strong in the body chart, and then becomes super strong, exalted in the soul chart.
Exactly. It's a double lock. When the planet of life force, the Ayushkaraka, is this powerful across both charts, it grants what is called Chiranjeevi level longevity.
Meaning?
Essentially immortal-like. 80 years would actually be an underachievement for this chart. It would be like a Ferrari engine dying at 30 miles per hour. A 120-year lifespan fits the planetary voltage much, much better.
So if he was born in 953 BCE, that puts his parinirvana around 833 BCE.
Roughly, yes.
That's credible, but it challenges our biological assumptions.
One of the biggest implications of this 953 BCE chart is the lifespan.
This is a major point of contention. Huge one. Standard history says he died at 80.
Which is a respectable age, but human. Very human.
Right. The story is he eats some spoiled food, he gets dysentery, and he passes away. The Hela tradition, which is supported by this chart, claims he lived to be 120.
Which, you have to admit, sounds mythological. It sounds like one of the biblical patriarchs living for centuries. It feels like a devotional exaggeration.
It does sound mythological, until you look at the Saturn placement in detail. We have to get a bit technical about Saturn for a moment.
Go for it.
Saturn is the Ayushkaraka. That's the Sanskrit term for the governor of longevity. It's the planet that dictates the length of life. In the 953 BCE chart, Saturn is in the 8th house.
And the 8th house is the house of death. That sounds bad.
It sounds bad, but it's also the house of lifespan. It's two sides in the same coin.
Yep.
So if you have a weak, afflicted planet there, you might die young. But here, Saturn is in the sign of Aquarius.
Which it rules.
It's in its own home. It is incredibly strong, incredibly stable. It's like having an indestructible fortress built on the very border of mortality.
Okay, so a strong Saturn in the house of lifespan points to a long life.
A very long life. But there's more. The notes mention a double lock.
Right. What's that?
This is where the researchers went deeper, into the divisional charts, specifically the D9 chart, which is called the Navamsaka.
And what does that show?
So you can think of the main chart, the D1, as the physical body. The D9 chart is like the internal organs or even the soul's blueprint. It shows the inner reality.
The fruit of the tree.
That's a great way to put it. So in the D9 chart for this 903 BCE time, Saturn becomes exalted. It gets even stronger.
So it's strong in the body and superpowered in the soul.
Precisely. You have Saturn strong in its own sign in the main chart and then exalted at its peak power in the soul chart. This creates a rare combination called Chiranjeevi Yoga.
Which means?
Chiranjeevi means immortal, or at least extremely long-lived. It is a specific astrological signature for a lifespan that goes far beyond the normal human range.
So from an astronomical or astrological perspective, a body with this engine, this configuration, shouldn't really stall out at 80.
80 would be premature engine failure for this chart. 120 years, which would mean dying in 833 BCE, is the mathematically consistent outcome based on these planetary...
Maybe it wasn't a myth.
Okay, let's talk about his mother. The story we all know is that Queen Mahamaya died 7 days after giving birth. It's always presented as this tragic, almost fated event. It's a core part of the lore.
And that narrative has always been astrologically and karmically problematic. Think about it. The Buddha is supposed to be a being of supreme merit, of pure karma. Why would his birth carry the karmic debt of effectively killing his mother? It implies a heaviness that contradicts his purity.
Right. It feels like a punishment or a bad omen.
Exactly. But if we look at the chart specifically, we can go deeper into the D12 chart, or Dwadasamsa. This is the divisional chart that astronomers use to look at parents and lineage.
Okay, the ancestral chart.
In the 953 BCE chart, the fourth house, the house of the mother, is ruled by Saturn.
Saturn, again, it keeps coming up. It feels like the main character of this story.
It is the anchor.
Yeah.
And Saturn, as we keep seeing, is incredibly strong. A strong Saturn ruling the fourth house indicates a mother figure who is stern, high status, disciplined, and crucially long-lived.
Long-lived, so she didn't die.
The Hela tradition suggests she didn't. It identifies his mother as Prajapati Gautami. Now, in the mainstream story, Prajapati is the aunt who steps in to raise him after Muhammad dies.
Right, the foster mother.
But the Hela timeline argues that Prajapati was the biological mother.
That is a massive twist.
It is. It suggests the death at 7 days might be a symbolic death. Perhaps she entered a monastic life. Or perhaps she took on a new role. Or, and this is quite possible, it's a later fabrication added to the story to fit a tragic hero archetype that was popular. The chart itself simply shows a mother who persists, a matriarch who lived and protected him.
That changes the whole psychological profile. He wasn't a motherless child. He was raised by a powerful matriarch.
A powerful Saturnian matriarch, exactly. And speaking of power, let's look at the renunciation. The standard story is that he was a delicate prince, shielded from the world inside a palace, who then saw a sick man, an old man, and a dead man for the first time and just freaked out. The foresights.
It's a great story. It's very dramatic. But is it true?
Let me ask you this. Does a man with an exalted sun, the ultimate king, and an exalted Mars, the ultimate general, really act like a naive, sheltered boy who has never seen an old person?
Probably not. That chart sounds like someone who is out in the world, making things happen, seeing reality for what it is.
Exactly. And the Dasha system, the planetary timeline of his life, tells a very different story. He was born with a balance of about 10 years of his Jupiter Dasha. That's the golden child phase, the gifted, protected youth.
Okay, that fits.
But from age 10 to age 29, he was running his Saturn Mahadasha, a 19-year period.
Saturn Dasha. For 19 years. That sounds heavy.
It is. It's a period of responsibility, hard work, discipline, and facing reality. But remember, Saturn rules the house where that exalted Mars sits.
Ah, right. Mars in Capricorn and Saturn rules Capricorn.
In this system, Saturn acts as a delivery mechanism for Mars's energy. So the Saturn Dasha delivered Mars results. And what are Mars results? Administration, military command, kingship.
So the 13 years of rule mentioned in the Hela tradition, that fits the Saturn Dasha.
It fits perfectly.
Yeah.
It suggests that from his teenage years until 29, he wasn't just sitting around the palace, he was likely ruling. He was an iron-hand administrator, a warrior king.
So he would have seen sickness, old age, and death all the time as part of his job.
He would have been signing the orders. He experienced the weight of governance. He saw the suffering inherent in the system, not because he looked over a palace wall, but because he was the one in charge of the system. He saw the corruption. He saw the limits of political power.
That reframes the renunciation completely. He didn't renounce because he was naive and scared. He renounced because he had conquered the material world and found it empty.
Precisely. He renounced from a position of total power. I have won this game, and it's not worth playing. And notice the timing. He left exactly when the Saturn Dasha ended at age 29. As soon as that Mars delivery phase was over, he walked away.
That makes the story so much more potent. It wasn't flight, it was a strategic decision made by a seasoned ruler.
It was. And that brings us to the inner architecture. We've looked at the D1 chart, the physical body, the life events, but to really understand a Buddha, you have to look at the divisional charts. The D9, D10, D20. These are like the schematic layers of his consciousness.
Okay, so break this down. Divisional charts. Is it like using a magnifying glass on the main chart?
That's a great analogy. You're zooming in on specific areas of life. The D9, the Navamsaka, is the chart of the soul, of marriage, of your inner reality. You called it the fruit of the tree earlier.
Right. The D1 is the tree, the D9 is the fruit.
Yes. And in the 953 BCE chart, the sun is in Aries in the D1, and it is also in Aries in the D9. This is a very important condition called Vargatama.
Vargatama. What does that mean for a personality?
It means absolute alignment. He was exactly who he appeared to be. There was no mask. The public king persona and the private soul persona were both fiery, authoritative, and solar. It's the signature of a Chakravartin, a universal ruler. He didn't have imposter syndrome.
What you see is what you get.
To an ultimate degree. Now look at the moon, the mind.
Okay.
The moon moves from Libra in the D1 to exalted Taurus in the D9. It's beautiful. In the physical world, the D1, his mind, the moon, was in Libra balance, diplomatic, seeing all sides. That's the velvet we talked about.
He could relate to people.
Perfectly. But deep internally, in the D9, his emotional core was in Taurus, where the moon is exalted. That means it was fixed, stable, and blissful.
So he presents as diplomatic and flexible, but inside he is immovable.
Exactly. This explains the Buddha smile. No matter how much suffering he saw, no matter how chaotic the world was around him, his internal state was one of unshakable bliss. He had an exalted emotional anchor deep inside.
That's incredible. Now let's look at the D20, the Navamsaka. This is the chart of spiritual practice, and you say occult knowledge.
This is where we see the hacker mentality. We don't usually associate the Buddha with the occult, but we should. The texts say he mastered all the siddhis, or supernatural powers.
Right.
In the D20 chart for this date, Rahu is in the first house.
Rahu. Isn't Rahu the shadow planet, the chaotic one, the demon head, the bad guy?
Yes. In conventional astrology, Rahu is often feared. It represents the outsider, the taboo breaker, the master of illusion and technology. Having Rahu in the first house of the spiritual chart suggests he was a Mahasiddha, an adept of esoteric practices. It means he didn't just follow the Vedic rulebook of his time. He hacked the system. He went off-piste.
He went left-hand path.
He explored it. He understood the nature of the dark. He understood Mara and the Yakshas, demons, by knowing their own magic. He conquered them not by hiding from them, but by understanding their source code. Rahu in the first house is the signature of a spiritual revolutionary who rejects the establishment, like the caste system, and creates a completely new technology for enlightenment.
So he wasn't just a monk praying, he was a spiritual scientist dismantling the simulation from the inside.
That's the Rahu and Aquarius energy. It's radical, futuristic innovation.
And what about his career? The D10 chart. Even after enlightenment, he had a career as a teacher.
The Dasamsaka, yes. Here, Mars is in the 7th house in the sign of Aries. Again, that commander energy shows up, even in his career as a spiritual leader.
How so?
He ran the Sangha, the monastic order, like a general. He established the Vinaya, a complex set of rules. He managed thousands of monks. He dealt with kings and patrons. He was decisive and authoritative. He wasn't a passive figure floating on a cloud. He was a CEO of a spiritual startup that went global.
This is painting a picture of someone incredibly formidable. Iron velvet, as the notes say.
Yes. Velvet on the outside, that diplomatic Libra moon, but pure iron on the inside, exalted Mars and Saturn, a justiciar. He gives you one chance for peace, but if you violate the Dharma, the law is enforced without hesitation.
So we have a chart that fits the Hela timeline perfectly. It paints this incredibly detailed, consistent picture. But we need to stress test this. How do we know we're not just retrofitting the story to fit a cool-looking chart?
Agreed. And the best stress test is the enlightenment itself. If this chart is real, the planetary transits at age 35 should scream enlightenment.
Okay, so we fast forward from his birth in 953 BCE to roughly 990 BCE, when he's about 34 or 35.
Yes. At this specific time, two massive planetary shifts happen. First, let's look at his Dasha. He started his Mercury Buddha Dasha at age 29, right after he left the palace.
Mercury, the planet of intellect.
Yes. Mercury is Buddha in Sanskrit. The intellect, analysis, the buddhi, the higher mind. So he enters a 17-year period focused on intellectual discovery.
That's appropriate.
But look at the transits, the real-time movement of the planets. At age 34-35, Jupiter transited into Pisces. For a Cancer ascendant, Pisces is the 9th house, the house of higher wisdom, guru, and dharma. And Jupiter is in its own sign there, making it incredibly powerful.
So Jupiter is just downloading massive cosmic wisdom into his house of wisdom.
It's a direct connection to the Akashic records, if you will. The channel is wide open for divine knowledge, but here's the kicker. At the exact same time, Saturn transits into Aries.
Aries, that's where his natal sun is, his exalted sun.
Correct. But here's the thing about Saturn. Saturn is debilitated in Aries. It is at its absolute weakest, and it feels harsh and uncomfortable, and it is crossing directly over his exalted sun.
The planet of reality is crossing over his kingly ego. What does that do?
It's the definition of ego death. Saturn, representing time, suffering, and hard reality, comes in and just pulverizes the sun, the eye maker, the king. And this happens at the exact moment that Jupiter wisdom is peaking.
So the ego's destroyed at the exact moment the wisdom is downloaded.
Exactly. It is the perfect astrological signature for anatta, the realization of no self. It's not just a metaphor. The stars literally acted out the process of enlightenment on his chart.
That is literal. It's poetic physics. That's an incredible stress test.
And there's another one, Devadatta.
The rival, his cousin who tried to kill him and take over the Sangha.
In the mainstream story, Devadatta is often portrayed as just a jealous, evil villain. But in this chart, we see exalted Mars in the 7th house, the house of opposition and open enemies.
Right, the general.
This predicts a rival who is strong, competent, and powerful, a warrior in his own right, not a weak, sniveling villain, a worthy adversary.
And the conflict with him. When did that happen?
It arises during the Mercury Dasha, the period of institutional organization. Devadatta was a Mars-Saturn figure all about rules, power, and asceticism. He was trying to replace the Buddha, a Jupiter figure all about wisdom and the middle path. He tried to take over the institution.
And the Buddha's reaction?
It fits the chart perfectly. Because he had that Libra moon, that perfect equanimity, he didn't fight back directly. He just let Devadatta's own ambition and karma collapse on itself. The chart predicts a structural rivalry, not just a petty personal one.
It's amazing how consistent this is. I read in the notes that this theory even holds up to a blind test.
Right. This is maybe the most compelling part. In our source material, there's an account of a researcher, let's call him Poisson for simplicity, who took the raw data of this chart.
So Cancer ascendant, moon in Vishaka second pada, specific dasha balance.
All of it. And he gave it to other astrologers without telling them who it was, no name attached.
Just the math.
Just the math. And what happened? The astrologers looked at the Saturn Dasha ending at 29 and the Saturn in the 8th, and immediately identified a massive life crisis or renunciation at that age. They saw the Grand Cross of Exaltation and said this person would be a world-changing leader. They predicted the biography without knowing the name.
That is the Ihipasiko approach the Buddha himself taught.
Exactly. Come see for yourself. Don't believe it because I say so. Verify the data, and the data holds up.
Ihipasiko. I love that. It's the ultimate scientific attitude. Don't believe, verify.
And that brings us to the personal connection mentioned in the sources. The researcher Poisson apparently shares a Vargatama Aquarius chart and a similar avatar rhythm. A life-changing shift from a Saturn Dasha to a Mercury Dasha. It's almost like he was astro-engineered to crack this specific code.
A system cracker for a system cracker.
In a way, yes. It takes a thief to catch a thief, or in this case, a cyber sage to decode the original sage.
Aquarius is the sign of the researcher, the systems thinker, the humanitarian who looks at the future and the past to find the underlying truth of how things work. But the kicker is his Rahu. He has Rahu in his 9th house.
The 9th house again, that's tradition, religion, history.
And Rahu in the 9th is the signature of the iconoclast, the historical revisionist. It creates an eclipse effect on tradition. It means you were born with an innate distrust of the textbooks. You don't trust the priests. You don't trust the official story. You want to see the source code for yourself.
So he's driven to.
He's driven to hack history to find out what was deleted or overwritten.
So real recognizes real. It took a Rahu-driven researcher to find the Rahu-driven Buddha.
That's a great way of putting it. He was temperamentally suited to this mystery. He instinctively applied the Ihipasiko standard to history itself.
Ihipasiko, that was the Buddha's famous catchphrase, wasn't it?
It was his core teaching principle. It means come and see for yourself. Don't believe something just because of tradition. Don't believe it because I, the Buddha, said so. Don't believe it because it's written in a holy book.
Test it.
Test it. Analyze it. See if it works in your own experience. So Poisson applied that. If the 563 BCE date fails the mathematical test, discard it. If the 953 BCE date fits the painting, the lifespan, the divisional charts, and the philosophy, then keep it until better data comes along.
So, to summarize, the mission of this deep dive today wasn't to preach a new religion or a new belief. It was simply to audit a historical timeline using the stars as our guide.
Exactly. And the audit suggests that the history of Sri Lanka, the ancient Hela civilization, might be the missing link in this whole story. If the Buddha was indeed born there in 953 BCE, then that island wasn't a periphery of the Buddhist world. It was the epicenter, the origin point.
That completely changes the geopolitical map of the ancient world.
It flips the map on its head.
It flips everything.
It really does.
So here's the final thought for you, the listener, to take away. We've thrown a lot of planetary yogas and specific dates at you today, but just step back for a second. Look at the narrative arc itself.
Yeah.
Which story is more coherent? Does it make more sense that the ultimate master of karma was born into a tragic situation that created a karmic plot hole, the death of his mother? Or does a coherent 120-year cycle of support and continuity make more sense?
Does it make more sense that he was a frightened, naive boy running away from reality? Or a powerful warrior king who conquered reality first, understood its limits, and then transcended it?
The Hela timeline offers a Buddha who is robust, logical, a figure of immense power who chose peace, not out of weakness, but as the ultimate expression of his strength.
He removes the need for these hidden karmic debts and presents a life that is philosophically clean. So let's just try and recap this. It's a lot. We have a wall painting in Gali, Sri Lanka that acts as a time machine.
A celestial schematic.
It points to a date, May 12, 953 BCE, that completely rewrites Indian and Sri Lankan history,
Pushing it back almost 400 years.
It suggests a 120-year lifespan that challenges our biological assumptions about the era.
Supported by a double-locked Saturn.
And it gives us a psychological profile of a warrior king sage that feels much more real, much more gritty than the fairy tale of the sheltered prince.
It creates a Buddha who is human but optimized. Not a god who pretended to be a man, but a man who pushed the limits of human potential, longevity, intellect, will to the absolute maximum.
And the fact that this truth survived, I mean, that's maybe the craziest part of the story.
That's the most beautiful part. It didn't survive in the official textbooks. Those were edited by kings and councils for political reasons. It survived in art.
Hiding in plain sight.
It survived because a painter in a temple in Ruhuna, which was historically the land of the rebels in Sri Lanka, decided to paint the actual stars on the ceiling, knowing that maybe 2,000 years later, someone might look up and do the math.
It's the ultimate time capsule.
It really is a message in a bottle, sent through time.
So what does this all mean for us? For you, the listener, what's the takeaway?
I think it challenges us to look for the bugs in the simulation of history. We accept dates, 563 BCE, 1776, whatever, as solid facts. But history is a narrative. It's a story written by winners and editors.
But the stars?
The stars, however, don't lie. They are a clock that keeps ticking, regardless of who is in power. Their movements are verifiable.
It makes you wonder what else is wrong. What other parts of the accepted narrative are just cover stories?
Exactly. If the timeline of arguably the most significant spiritual figure in Asia is off by 400 years, what other timelines are distorted? What other myths, like the 120-year lifespan or a forgotten advanced Hela civilization, are actually historical realities that we just deleted because they didn't fit our neat and tidy model of the past?
That is a thought that will keep me up tonight.
It's a good kind of insomnia. It's the kind that leads to discovery.
Indeed. Well, that's our deep dive for today. We went from a temple ceiling in Gale to the deep antiquity of 953 BCE. We decoded the God mode chart and met a Buddha who was sharper, stronger, and more complex than we ever imagined.
Just to share, an iron velvet.
I like that. Iron velvet. For all of you listening, next time you walk into a temple or a museum or an old church, look up. You never know what kind of code is painted on the ceiling. Until next time, keep asking questions.
And verify everything. Ihe Pasiko.
Ihe Pasiko. See you in the next deep dive.